Whenever I ask players where they currently are in their Marble Snap journey, the answer I get the most is heading towards the end of Pool 3. Pool 3 is arguably the most important subset of cards in Marble Snap, and the largest, as it takes up most of your journey as you continue your way towards the endgame part of the game. Occasionally players will have a single Series 4 or Series 5 card, but for the most part they're looking for deck lists that they think are able to compete in the wider ladder metagame without having access to any of those, and just with a complete set of Series 3 cards. We like to do our best to highlight deck lists for this kind of subsection of the game as and when possible, and today we are due another update for exactly that. If you're looking for a video about deck lists when you're starting Pool 3, we've actually got one for all 76 cards currently in the pool that was made a little while ago. You can go and check out here. But today, we're going to be looking at what we think are the best decks you can possibly play with access to nothing but Pool 3. So some clarifications for what this video is about exactly. Today, we're looking at the deck lists we think are your best options if all you want to do is climb the ranked ladder. There is a lot of sweet stuff you can do in Pool 3, and I highly encourage you to do it. It's a large part of what makes Marble Snap as fun as it is. But these deck lists today are targeted towards people who are looking for optimal archetypes to climb to the infinite rank. Secondly, these decks will assume you have a complete Series 3 collection, so in some cases, you will still be missing cards if you've not reached that point in your Marble Snap journey just yet. With that being said, you're welcome to ask about potential replacements in the comment section down below if you prefer, or come and find us over on Twitter directly at Marble Snap Zone and ask, and we'll see what we can do in order to help you out in that capacity. Last but not least, this video was created at the end of January 2023, just before the series drop happened. So, these deck lists will be accurate for that period of time, and will likely change quite significantly in the future. If you enjoy this type of content, it'll be good on you to let us know. It means we'll know to update this as more cards enter Series 3, so more and more videos like this become available to those who might enjoy them. With all that said, let's get started on the obvious one, the good cards archetype. It's kind of hard to be named that without being a valid choice when you're looking for decks that contain good cards. As time passes and you collect more cards, you start to have enough that are just simply good on their own and don't necessarily need a deck to build around them or any kind of synergy. It can be cards worth a lot of power for their cost, things like Maximus or Lizard, cards that have huge ceilings for their cost like Sunspot and Thor, or just cards with a very powerful ability like Aero or Leader. Sometimes these cards just make sense in the current metagame, things like Leech, Magneto, Shang-Chi. When you mix all these cards together, this is what you get. The good cards archetype is basically just a pile of cards built around playing the best ones at every single energy cost in the game currently. As we're recording this, the archetype is actually very well positioned in the metagame, arguably a top 5 pick overall. Its ability to get ahead early in the game, then leverage that lead with powerful abilities later, make it both a simple and effective concept. You're looking to get priority with this one, which means you need more power than your opponent early on, with cards like Lizard and Maximus. Keep that priority while gathering information with cards like White Queen, and then just dictate the final 2 turns of the game with effects like Aero and Leader. If this plan would fail or your draws don't line up, you still have a couple other patterns to alternate plays on every single energy cost over the course of a game. It doesn't get much more complicated than this, you know, the rest is pretty much about adapting to your opponent and to the locations that you currently see. Leech is one of the most important cards in this version of the deck, as it can make or break some matchups for you. You want to look to play it as early as possible against these highly synergistic decks in order to derail their usually extremely important turn 6. The big offender for this, of course, is Silver Surfer, so keep your eyes open for those style of decks. Good cards isn't limited to just one shell, however. In fact, we made another video recently comparing the 2 different versions you're welcome to check out. The second one we could recommend is the Devil Dinosaur variation of this archetype. This one offers you a way to develop a ton of points and have resources throughout the course of the game, as opposed to interacting quite as much. This build tends to be easier to grasp as it contains less reactive or matchup based cards. On the other end, this deck develops fewer points during the first 4 turns, turns, which can make it harder to seize priority going into the aero turn, for example. Also, it's important to have a good sense of hand management in order to maximize the power of Devil Dinosaur, but also make sure that your Moon Girl and White Queen don't have their abilities interrupted. This deck definitely has two clear parts to it overall. We have the utility cards, which is honestly most of the deck. They contribute towards points, but then also add a little something to the equation along the way. We're looking to play those cards without locking up options for ourselves later on, Cosmo being the most sensitive of the bunch, as we need to think about where we want to play it so that we don't aero or leader into the same location. It can serve as really good protection for our Devil Dinosaur though, so positioning in this case is very, very critical. The rest of the deck is going to be your win conditions. This normally consists of Devil Dinosaur, Aero and Leader being the big three cards in this deck, with each one expected to contest or win a lane by themselves. Most of the game should be conceptualized with these cards in mind, because you should be expecting to play them on the final 2 turns. The whole point when playing this deck is to set up the best possible situation for those win conditions and give them the best chance of winning you a lane by themselves. If the utility cards are able to take a lane the opponent didn't seriously invest to, that's going to make your job even easier. Just like the other good cards list, seizing priority when going into your aero turn turns to be a very influential part of how this deck is played when it's being played at its best. Up next is another one of the first archetypes centered around a card you might see in your Pool 3 adventure. It's time to take a look at Patriot, a card that brings back most of the no ability vanilla cards you dismissed back in Pool number 1. In this deck, Misty Knight, Shocker and Cyclops are making a comeback and actually represent the core of this deck alongside the signature namesake in the form of Patriot. The concept is really simple. We want to pair a certain type of cards with the buff that will make them stronger, and then use Mystique and Onslaught in order to duplicate that buff and get even stronger. This deck has 3 different buffs, which can totally work together and buff the same cards. Patriot looks to strengthen your vanilla cards in the deck, helping them go from a card nobody thought about playing to one that would cause the opponent to retreat and is a real threat in any lane they're in. Wasp, Misty Knight, Shocker, Cyclops, these are the cards that receive Patriot's +2 buff, but also the Squirrel from Squirrel Girl and the Rock from Debris and the Robots from Ultron. These are all things that count towards being no ability cards. Kazar here is here to buff the 1-cost cards, getting some small number to be a more reasonable contribution. Squirrel Girl, Misty Knight and most of Ultron's drones are affected by Kazar in this case. Lastly, we have Blue Marvel. Blue Marvel's the nice guy. He's going to buff everybody. No distinction whatsoever. Everyone just gets a +1 over the course of the game. Ideally, the perfect setup would be to decide as early as possible which locations you intend on fighting for, and which will serve as the recipient of your buffing cards. So, Patriot being a 1-power card, Mystique being a 0-power card, Blue Marvel being a 3-power card, the locations these are played on are often going to be hard to win. Even with Onslaught and Ultron contributing more points to that overall total, it's rare that you have a fighting chance against an opponent who decided to heavily invest into that location. So with that in mind, it's important to make sure you are really strong on the other 2 lanes. Up next, we've got Deathwave. Deathwave was previously thought to be the best deck in the game for a very long time, but a lot of popular tech cards in the current metagame are due to Deathwave's dominant run before and during global release. Did you know that Aero became the feared card it is today because it was discovered to be a great card in Deathwave? It allows you to control the opponent's turn while you can freely play Death for somewhere else to take that location in the process. Similarly, Leader rose to being one of the most hated cards in the game, but once was simply considered to counter Deathwave's last turn. Something that was so difficult to match, we had no choice but to try and take it for ourselves. Lastly, the big popularity of Armor, one of the most recurring cards in the 2-cost slot in Marvel Snap, is largely due to the destroy mechanic being among the strongest ones when it is left unchecked. So where does Deathwave get most of its power? The deck is built around some simple synergies. You're looking to destroy 2 cards early in the first 4 turns of the game. This can be through effects like Carnage or Killmonger, and play very well with effects like the Hood and Squirrel Girl and even Bucky Barnes to give you cards you're happy to destroy. Step 2 is playing Wave on turn 5, and Step 3 will let you play any card plus your Wave on turn 6, which should cost 2 or less energy because of the cards we have already destroyed. Ideally, that other card is Leader or Arrow as a way to control what your opponent's going to do in the process and make sure you stay ahead on the lanes you've built with your Destroy synergy during the first couple turns of the game. This deck has the ability to evolve as you move into Series 4 courtesy of the power of She-Hulk, but this one is kind of a long-term staple of Marvel Snap and has definitely proved its credentials in many forms. It's a deck that you can look to build towards and look to expect to improve as you work through Series 3 and continue on into Series 4 and 5. Up next we have Lockjaw On Reveal, regularly labelled the high roll archetype as the core strategy relies on summoning random cards from your deck. Lockjaw is among the cards every deck builder loves to have at its disposal in order to try and make different combinations work. Once you understand the different parts of your deck, you actually have a lot of fun trying out all the various options to find the ones that suit you best. Here is a typical breakdown of the Lockjaw archetype overall. Lockjaw, of course, is the namesake card, and Jubilee helps in cheating your big cards into play. America Chavez offers you some consistency in your draw steps, and Wasp is the best thing you can play to enable Lockjaw on turn 3. 2 to 3 more big cards to summon tend to be the normal expected amount, and the bigger the better in most cases, hence why the Infernaut, Giganto and Magneto are included in this version here. The more flexible cards are things like Nightcrawler and Vision. You can move them out of Lockjaw's lane after they get summoned to make more space for your signature card. Thor and Jane Foster Mighty Thor have the synergy around Mjolnir, which serves as another free activator for Lockjaw down the line. Dracula basically serves as a second copy of Jubilee, and a way to get a big card's power without the cost of having to play it. Once you understand the role of every card in the deck, you can actually find a ton of small packages to test for yourself. Most of the time, on reveal cards tend to do great in the deck, as they can be triggered multiple times through being cycled with Lockjaw. So cards like Korg and Iceman have seen play in the archetype in the past. Gameplay wise, the key here is to not get too carried away by your Lockjaw lane, and remember that Marvel Snap actually requires you to win 2 lanes. As such, you have to think about the cards you want to use alongside Lockjaw and those who can serve to anchor that second location all by themselves. Lockjaw can be played in a number of decks in Series 3 though. Lockjaw Discard coming up for you next. As an old fan favourite, we recommend giving a spin when you can. The Discard synergy is one that is associated with fast, flood the board base decks until you reach pull 3. Then you start to unlock some key cards to get the Discard archetype towards something more combo orientated, especially when you get Dracula and Lockjaw into the mix. Similarly to the previous deck, the deck tries to abuse Lockjaw in order to cycle its cards and repeat their abilities when you're doing so. Except, contrary to the other deck, we aren't trying to cheat out specific cards. We're actually just looking to discard as much as possible in order to grow Morbius, Apocalypse, and duplicate copies of Swarm. So while the previous deck was likely dominating the lane you played Lockjaw in, the Discard archetype focuses its points on the other lanes instead. The Lockjaw lane will normally be filled with utility cards, allowing our other cards to grow but not developing a ton of points by themselves. Morbius and Dracula should be seen as cards that can carry a lane. They should be able to lock it down all by themselves when you anchor them to that single location. Lockjaw is more of a motor in this deck and helps your deck do what it does more efficiently than you can without it, and helps to dig to find more discard effects when you need them. Swarm and Apocalypse are the recipients of those same discard effects. Apocalypse grows with the intent of being discarded to Dracula in the game's end, while Swarm can be a great utility to play behind Lockjaw and dig into your deck to keep things spinning. Colleen Wing and Lady Sif are targeted discard effects, so we shouldn't have any bad surprises in store when we go for them. The other cards might require some hand management in order to not throw away a valuable resource, so with that in mind, you don't necessarily have to go all in on Lockjaw early on. It's reasonable to wait until turn 5 once you've prepared your hand and want to discard an Apocalypse a ton without losing your Dracula in the process. Leech is the last card in this build, included mostly for high roll purposes, as it's a really good one to pull early off of Lockjaw. Moving on to one of my favourite archetypes in the game, Electro Ramp is a deck I've taken to Infinite many times now, and it's arguably the easiest deck to pilot on this list if you're looking for something fundamentally quite simple. Electro Ramp is a deck with an agenda, and it doesn't like it when that agenda is disturbed. As such, once you understand the deck's agenda and the various ways you can push it, there isn't much more you need to understand in order to be a good pilot of Electro Ramp. The start can be a little bit rocky at times because the deck wants to focus on producing a strong turn 4, 5 and 6. Without Electro, you can start that pattern with Psylocke or Wave as well in a pinch. We have ways to disrupt our opponent with Leech, Leader, and arguably Magneto, and ways to develop more stats as well in the form of cards like White Tiger and Doctor Doom. Both kind of cards merge in this synergy with Wong and Odin, giving you more ways to pile them together and create more massive results all around. In order to make sure that our on-reveal effects aren't being denied by the opponent, we want priority going into our key turns, and Ebony Maw and Lizard being worth a lot of points should help in that regard. And there you go. Now you're all set to play Electro Ramp if you know those 3 basics of the deck. The rest of the experience is mostly navigating locations and trying to understand how your opponent can limit your agenda based on your hand, given the annoying cards they could be packing. Once you know how to retreat and snap effectively with this deck, you are already onto a good one. I truly believe that all the decks you see in this video are capable of climbing to Infinite with enough patience, as they are definitely strong enough to do so. However, the key point when you start playing in Pool 3 is your snaps and your retreats. Up until now, in Pool number 2, you could always kind of get away with it, facing enough bots to get some grinding done, or capitalise on your opponent's inexperience with the cards you're currently playing, but once you enter Pool 3, you will have to be a little more careful. The strategies will diversify all around and players will have picked up more experience under their belt. Another emphasis on Pool 3 is the frustration often associated with collecting all of the cards, as it will start to become much slower compared to Pool 1 and Pool 2. You might feel robbed of losing to a card you don't have yet, or helpless against certain strategies that you're facing for the first time. This is all part of the experience of Marvel Snap, and it's important to detach yourselves from simply trying to grind cubes, and instead try and learn about this new environment. Comfort will come sooner than you expect it, and you'll be back on the grind in no time, as long as you allow yourself this precious time to get settled into Pool 3, one of the toughest places to start diving into in Marvel Snap. If you have some questions about this video or any of the deck lists included in it, feel free to reach out to us on Twitter or in the global Discord. You could find us at Marvel Snap Zone, find me at HowlingMines, or Den at DenCCG, and the link to our Discord with thousands of other players is available for you in the description box down below. If you haven't already, please do consider subscribing to the channel here at Marvel Snap Zone. We want to keep on putting out content for you over here on YouTube, so leaving a comment, liking the video, and pressing that button, turning on your notifications, does a great job of letting the YouTube gods know that we don't suck at what we are doing. Last but not least for today, just an update for the people that have been asking me for it. I have internet again. It's been a long time since I've actually had any internet in my house, which means I can get back to live streaming, and I fully intend on doing so tonight at 6:30 PM GMT. So if you've been missing out on your fix of Marvel Snap Zone YouTube live streams, you want to come and say hi to me in person, I will be live tonight and looking forward to getting that wheel spinning again because I've missed you all very much. But until next time, I have been HowlingMines, you've been amazing, and this has been Marvel Snap Zone. Take care. Have a good one.